Welcome to Your Life is the Medicine. This is the first episode of 2026. Happy New Year. Happy January. Today, I want to talk to you about winter health and wintering. And they're not exactly the same, but in my mind, they go together. So I'm going to start with this quote from Donna Ashworth that I found this year and that I really love. It says, "Wintering. You may think yourself lazy or flawed, yet your body is made of almost exactly the same elements as the stars. Your bone composition matches the coral in the seas, and you, my friend, are ruled by the moon and the sun, whether you like it or not. So no, you are not lazy. Nature is simply pulling you to slow, like the life, flora, and fauna around you. It is not your moment to rise. It is winter. You are wintering, and you are right on time." Donna Ashworth. So we're in this time of year, right, where winter started with the solstice, right before the holidays or during the holidays. And the solstice is really this time of slowing down, of pausing, of this deep inner energy. And yet, because of the holidays and sort of the way that we have come to talk about the end of the year and New Year's, there's actually this like burst of energy, and there's a lot of joy, and there's a lot of tasks, and there's a lot of stress, honestly, for most of us also. And so it's sort of like for many, there's the whole range of emotions, of course, but for many, there's this energy of like getting through the holidays. And then there's this energy of like moving into 2026, and there's all of this discussion of like goals and intentions and starting January strong and what are you going to do next year? And they all can add benefit, and they're sort of counter to the season. And so the season of winter is the yin energy. It is the passive, the receptive, the dark, the slow energy, the allowing energy rather than the making something happen energy. And of course, we live in a modern busy world with a lot of tasks. So we can't completely be in yin, like we wouldn't function, right? But if we are talking about a balance of yin energy and yang energy, of activity and rest, of doing and being, it's not that it's like the goal is not 50-50 all the time, right? The goal is to balance those energies and bring more of one of them in when it's needed. And seasonally, this is the time when we need to bring more yin, more rest, more slowing, and more being into our lives. And if you look at nature and what's mirrored seasonally in nature, there isn't like the plants don't have all these leaves, there aren't flowers blooming, like the energy is like a moving in and a moving down kind of energy. It's a deepening. So there is the plants, not all of them, but the plants and the trees are still alive, but that energy and their living is much more subtle and internal. And if we pay close attention, we can see what's happening with trees, but it's not so obvious. It's not the beautiful bursting forth of energy that happens in the spring. And we need this time of rest, this time of rejuvenation in order for in our next season of life, whether that is the seasons like spring or whether we are in a time of life that is harder, we need the rest and rejuvenation in order to be able to thrive, in order to be able to blossom and bloom and expand and grow in the next season that we are asked to grow in. And so the work now is a much more internal, unseen, subtle, inner work of reflection, of rest, of nourishment, of tending to our needs in order that we can then expand and have more activity and growth and accomplishment and achievement and doing. And so just really thinking about the invitation is not that we all like hibernate, right? though if hibernating appeals to you, then make that happen in whatever way you can. But the invitation is to think about the balance and to think about the being versus doing in your life and inviting in more being, the rest versus being active and inviting in more rest in whatever shape that takes, in being in the dark versus being in the light, and just thinking about this balance and what you might need to shift, because we can all shift something, and we also all have busy, full lives. Like our modern world is busy and it's active, and there's lots of bright lights to allow us to stay up late and keep doing things even when the world is dark. And just as in contrast, as sort of an example, when I was a Peace Corps volunteer and lived in Paraguay, I lived in a small community, and wintertime was cold, right? Like it was subtropical, so it wasn't as cold as Colorado, but we also didn't have central heating, right? And so in the wintertime, like life was structured differently around the daylight and around the temperatures. And so people would, we would, if we had to do laundry, which was hand washing clothes, we often did that in the middle of the day because it was warmer. When it got dark, people would gather and we would sit around together and stay warm until drinking like warm mate or being around essentially like a fire to stay warm and be in community. And then we would go to bed. Whereas in the summer, we might not eat dinner until 10 o'clock. And there was much more like activity and openness and expansiveness. And in the winter, there was much more of this contraction that the season invites. And my life in the United States does not look like that, right? My kids still have the same school schedule. My work still has the same schedules. And yet the invitation is how do we start to shift to honor the seasons, because our body feels the season. And so for me, the last few years of really working with the seasonal energetics and thinking about, because the seasonal energetics show up in traditional systems of medicine like Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine. And so creating seasonal rhythmicity in my life and trying to adjust how I'm living based on the season helps me live more in alignment with my body and helps my body feel better. And so that is the promise or the benefit or the hope of aligning more is with the seasons. So with seasonal living and seasonal wellness is that we find a little bit more ease and we feel a little bit better in our bodies. That's what I found. And I hope that as you begin to add more seasonal awareness and more connection with nature and seasons, I hope that you also find more ease and a little bit more honoring of what your body has capacity for in each season. So let's talk about some sort of winter health practices from the standpoint of some of these traditional systems of medicine and from seasonal wellness. So some of the things, so in traditional Chinese medicine, the meridians associated with winter are the bladder and kidney meridians. And kidney really holds sort of our vital energy, our essence, and they're sensitive to the cold. And the element associated with kidney is water. And so we're in this time of water and of really wanting to protect our energy in this season. And so when I think about what are the biggest things that show up for me in terms of how I adapt my health practices and my life, I think about sort of paying attention to energy. I think about hydration. I think about rest. I think about movement. And I think about food. So I'll start with hydration because it's somewhat straightforward. Again, the kidney benefits and our bodies benefit from being well hydrated. And it seems very basic, and people always ask, like, how much should you drink? And there are people who give numbers. I would connect more to what feels better in your body and play with, if I drink more, how does this feel? If I drink less, how does this feel? Water, we obviously want to drink lots of water and limit sugary beverages and caffeinated beverages. This time of year, it is especially nourishing for the body to have warm liquids, so warm herbal teas, warm water if you're up for that. I actually like to start my day often with a glass of warm water because I always feel a little bit dehydrated when I wake up, and it is helpful for me to begin my day with a full glass of water. And in the winter, I make more of an effort for that water to be at least warm and not cold. So hydrating sufficiently, hydrating with warm teas, warm water, warm beverages, limiting caffeine and sugar. And for me, I also find electrolytes to be helpful at times. I don't drink electrolytes every day, but if I'm feeling more dehydrated, sometimes I'll add an electrolyte packet to my water, and that really helps me kind of catch up or helps my body hold the water, hold the hydration better. I can't explain that scientifically, but that's my lived experience of that. When I think about hydration, I also think about the other sort of parts of our bodies that need hydrated besides just drinking. And so thinking about the mucous membranes of our nose and respiratory system, and in Colorado, which is a very dry climate, with the heaters running in the winter, the air can be really, really dry. And so I find it helpful to have a humidifier at night. And so I sleep with a humidifier every night. My husband really feels the dryness, and he feels benefit from having a humidifier on during the day as well. So really just paying attention to like how dry is your environment, and would it help for you to have more humidity in your environment? Perhaps you live somewhere that's very humid and that doesn't apply, but that's my experience in the winter time with heaters running. There are also practices in Ayurveda where you can hydrate the nasal passages with particular oils. So I find this helpful to do from time to time. I don't do this as a regular practice at this point in my life, but paying attention to when my nasal passages feel really dry, or I feel like my respiratory system needs a little extra attention. I also really spend a lot of time hydrating my skin throughout the year, but especially in winter. And for me, again, this has come from an Ayurvedic practice of Abhyanga, of self-massage. And I use Ayurvedic body oils and really spend just a minute or two in the morning, or more if I have time, but at least that 1 minute of like really hydrating my skin with oils or with lotion, but paying attention to how dry my skin can get. And it's a wellness practice, but it's a practice of self-love, right? It's a practice of checking in with my body and noticing that my body would benefit from some extra attention and extra care. So that's hydration, thinking about drinking, thinking about skin, and thinking about like the dryness in the air and our mucous membranes and sort of nasal and respiratory passages. Food. So healthy diets often promote like salads and fresh vegetables, and while those are wonderful, in this season it is harder, like our digestive fire has to work harder to maintain that digestive fire from a more traditional perspective. And so cold foods, and especially, really kind of dampen or dim the digestive fire. So this is a season that we want to really prioritize warm foods and cooked vegetables that are easier to digest, that really nourish us. And thinking about things like root vegetables and warming spices. So things like cinnamon and cloves and cumin and ginger and turmeric. So things that are peppers, things that really help warm the body, help warm the digestive fire. Moving away from like summer fruits. So while berries, and I really for a while followed like the how not to die. I have the How Not to Die cookbook, and there's an app with like a list of foods that you want to try to get every day, and like there's berries on that list. And so while there are real health benefits to berries, In the wintertime, I don't eat them every day. I don't eat them as much because seasonally they're not consistent seasonally with what my body feels better with. So I still eat them if I want them, but really prioritizing apples and citrus and some of the more wintry fruits and vegetables. So we talked about hydration, we talked about food. The last thing I'll say about food is I don't believe that there's any one diet that's right for everyone. I think bodies are really individual. Everything I teach when I work with clients individually or in groups is about listening to your own body. And so if you are trying to switch what you're eating, it's about trying it and then checking in. You may even eat a meal and then check back in with yourself in an hour, 2 hours and say like, how do I feel? Like, how does my digestion feel? Like, does that feel like it was too much food, too little food, the right kind of food, not the right kind of food? And adapting and learning based on the feedback from your own body, not based on what other people tell us, right? We can take the information that other people tell us and we can try it in our own lives, but what your body tells you is the right answer. So we talked about nutrition. So talking about movement. So movement, I think, is a hard one. And I use the word movement because I think there is both exercise, but there is intentional movement that simply moves your body and may move your body more intentionally and more mindfully than exercise. So when I think of exercise, I think of intense yoga. I think of running. I think of, biking, lifting, all of the things that we do for a quote workout. My favorite kind of yoga is the slow, intentional connecting with my body yoga. I don't actually want to do yoga as a workout. I don't think that that is consistent with the original teachings of yoga, and it's not what feels good in my body. Like, what feels good in my body is really slowing down and paying attention to the movement and how my body is moving. And I will also say that I have recently started working with a practice called somatic groundwork that has been quite profound, and it is even slower movement. And the more you slow down, the more information I get from my body, and that's pretty exciting. So when I think about movement and exercise in winter, like Western, evidence-based science and medicine will tell us that we should be still getting 150 minutes a week of moderate exercise, up to 300. And for women, I really believe that we need to prioritize strength training from perimenopause and beyond. And so, but again, the season says like how much feels good, how much exercise, how much strength training, how much cardiovascular exercise feels good. And maybe I need to drop the intensity just a little bit sometimes in the winter, or maybe I actually need to do less of that and do more slower movement, whether that's walking instead of something more intense, or whether that is slower yoga or Tai Chi or any other kind of movement practice. But really just paying attention again to whether the movement that you're doing or the exercise that you're doing feels good in your body. Because sometimes when we do too much exercise, it can be depleting. And figuring out for each person and at each season and each stage of life how much exercise is good, like where's that little bit of push versus how much is too much, and we're now depleting our energy and depleting ourselves. An extreme example, I met a woman many years ago who came to see me because of fatigue after having cancer. And as we talked a little bit more about her fatigue, this person was walking 5 miles every morning as exercise, both because that's what she thought was helpful, and also it helped her manage her anxiety and her stress. And yet she was telling me that after that walk and after that exercise, for the rest of the day, she often felt very fatigued. And so it was, in my mind, a very clear example of when something that is beneficial, right? Exercise is beneficial. It becomes harmful, or it becomes, the dose determines the medicine or the poison, right? So sometimes, and so this exercise practice that she was doing with wonderful intention and that did help her mental health was in fact depleting her body. And so in wintertime, we really, again, it's a slower season. It's more yin than yang, and really paying attention to what is the right amount of moderate to intense activity. What is the right amount of strength training for you? And how does it shift a little bit in winter to honor your body's capacity? Because most of us actually have, if we're honest, our capacity often feels less in the winter. And if we're connected to our bodies. So again, I'm not going to ever give you a formula, because it's really about listening to your body and creating the life that feels good for you. So that's my thoughts on movement and exercise in winter. And then also just thinking about energy in winter. Again, many of us feel like we have less energy. My own experience, especially when the time changes and close to the solstice, is when I come home from work and it is dark. All I really want to do is have dinner and read a book, right? Whereas when it's still light in the evenings, I'm like, let's go for a walk, let's get outside, let me be active, let my mind be active, let me do some work. And in the wintertime, all I want to do is curl up with a book, or be in my warm bed. And so I really feel that decrease in energy a lot in the darkness. And of course, I absolutely can push myself, right? I can turn on the lights, I can turn on my heater, and I can still work at night if I want to. And yet during the winter, I try to honor that desire to slow down, because the idea is this is a time of rest. We want to give our body the opportunity to rest and rejuvenate so that we feel better later. So in the winter, really paying attention to what your energy feels like, how much capacity you feel like you have to do things, and maybe saying no to some of the things that you might say yes to in another season. Maybe it's less social engagements. Maybe it's less extra work. Maybe it's really honoring that at night you want to go to bed earlier. And so really thinking about and paying attention to your energy and how it ebbs and flows, and what helps you feel nourished and what makes you feel more depleted and tired in the winter. And that brings me to rest. So many of us feel better resting more in the winter. And that might mean going to bed earlier, and really not just going to bed earlier, but thinking about how you go to bed. What is your slowing down practice? Many of us, and this was definitely me for many, many years, I didn't have any space between my day and bedtime. And so it was go, 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 make dinner, take care of the kids, do this, do that, squeeze in that last little bit of work. And then I try to go to sleep. And the moment my head hits the pillow, then my brain started processing my day, because it was the first time all day I had a chance to be alone with myself, right? It was the first time I had a chance to pause and really slow down. And so if we go to bed and go to sleep sort of stuck in a dysregulated nervous system, it often affects both how long it takes us to fall asleep and the quality of our sleep. And so really paying attention, do I fall asleep quickly when I go to bed? Am I busy, 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 and then I try to go to bed? What is an intermediary step I can add? And how can I add something that really nourishes me? Maybe it's a bath, maybe it's reading a book, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's meditating, but something slow. And also turning down the light, beginning to tell our body that we're moving into the darkness. So those are all the things that I think about. I'm sure there's more that I forgot to say that as soon as I stop, I'll wish I had told you. But that's really sort of the kind of map and the way that I think about winter and taking care of myself in the winter. What my teacher several years ago said, partly that winter's about learning to love the dark. And when I did the functional medicine environmental health module at the end of 2025, and one of the instructors said, like, we have a lack of darkness. Like, we spend so much time in artificial lights. And for me, like, the journey of learning to love the dark, of really slowing down in winter, of honoring winter and the teachings of winter and the medicine of winter has been a many-year journey. Like, I am definitely I'm a summer person. I love the warmth. I love the expansiveness. I love the activity. And so while I love things like skiing in the winter, I have not traditionally loved winter. And it has been a journey of many years to really learn to love the dark, to really appreciate the medicine of winter, and to learn how to feel better during winter. The last thing I would say that's actually been really important to me is making sure I get sunlight. So on the days that I go to the hospital and I'm there all day and I may never see sunlight, those days are hard for me. And so as much as possible, I really try to arrange my schedule so that I can get outside during the day, at least for a little bit. And if it's really, really cold, then just being by windows with natural light. But as much as possible, like getting outside and trying to go for a walk outside, because that really nourishes me. And if I'm stuck inside too many days in a row without sunlight, I don't I don't feel I don't feel vibrant and I don't feel well. So as a closing, I would just ask you kind of what does winter mean to you? What are your feelings around winter? And where do they come from? Are they, do they feel positive? Do they feel negative? Where do they come from? And and then really just spend a few minutes asking what you need this winter, like asking what your body needs and asking what you might want to shift to really honor your body and honor this season. So thank you so much for being here. I hope this was helpful, and I wish you a beautiful, beautiful January.